Begin the on Daf Mesechtes Nazir Daf Memtes. We begin on the top line of the Yomid, where the Gemara, in the middle of these specific drushes, continues because the previous Mishnah had discussed what do you do. The Mishnah opening up this parak Kohen Gadol discussed that Kohen Gadol and Nazir are not supposed to be metamel l'kreveim, but what we had, they are, whether that's the Girs or not, they're metamel l'mes mitzvah. That's where the Gemara was finding out the sources for that. Once we did that, we were going through the Psukim that talks about the Isser Tumah for the Kohen Gadol and for the Nazir, and then to see what extra words or what limudim are to learn, although he cannot be metamel to really anyone, even his relatives, but l'mes mitzvah he could. That's what the Gemara is in the middle of discussing that specifically according to Rabbi Kiva, going through his chesbainis of how we explained them on the previous daf. We had Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel, different ways of interpreting the Psukim. According to Rabbi Kiva, actually in the Rishonim we even see that it's not even clear which one he's talking about regarding the Nazir or the Kohen Gadol. But be that as it may, how to darshan the source of the halacha of metamel mes mitzvah. Let's just close upon the Pakazich and the Cheskel, turn to the Daf Yomi, doing today's daf. So I'm discussing today's daf, like we said, Rabbi Kiva's source for Nazir metamel mes mitzvah. Where does he know that from? And also, why does it require both la'av and la'imay for the drasha? Seemingly one extra word, la'av or la'imay, would be enough. Why does he say la'av u'la'imay? Remember, it goes through the pasuk, la'av u'la'imay, la'achav la'chaysa, it goes through those people. Why does he have to mention two for the same drasha? Then we go to the next Mishnah, which talks about this theme about the Isser Tumah of the Nazir. So the following Tumahs, the Mishnah says, the Nazir can be Megaleach, and it says, Alames, Val Kazayit Names, that both of them, Bein B'maga, Bein B'masiv, Bein B'oil, goes through a whole list of things, and the Gemara is going to ask, why does the Mishnah mention both Mes and Kazayit Names? If you have to be Megaleach al Kazayis, why would you mention the whole Mes, Kaval Chaymer? Some important terms and concepts are B'sar HaMes, is metame when it is a kazais, meaning a flesh from a dead person is metame when it's a shear of an olive. Aver hames, the limb of a mess, is metame when it consists of etzem, bone, basar, flesh, and gidin, and ligaments. Atzamas hames, the bones of a dead person, are metame only when they are equaling a quarter of a kav. However, a nazir is only megaleach, meaning he has to be seiser's whole counting only when that atzama is equal like half of a kav. It's halacha meisha mesina. So although generally the tumah is with a quarter, but for the halacha of giluach of being seiser is a half of a cup. So we begin the current daf mem tes amid aleph. We had mentioned on the previous daf that there's a halacha that a nazir and kohen gadol metamel mes mitzvah. Now according to Rabbi Kiva, we had mentioned it says in the pasuk kol yimei haziru l'Hashem. We're talking about the nazir. It says all the days that he's nazir to Hashem. Al nefesh meis lo yavoy. He's now become in contact with a dead person. Lo aviv, lo imoy, lo achiv, lo achaysei, lo yitamel b'maisim. He's not going to yitamel them when they're dead. So we had mentioned that according to Bekiva, it says nefesh meis. Nefesh tells you the rechikim is forbidden to non-relatives. Mes tells you elakaravim, the relatives. And then we said, lo imoy, whatever to say. You already said for nefesh and mes, rechikim and kravim. I know everyone is forbidden. What are you going through and telling me father and mother? Lo imoy tells me lo imoy the metame. A metame hu mes mitzvah, but you can metame too a mes mitzvah. That's the source. What's the achib? That's what we said. If he's a kohen gadol and a nazir, then only to his brother can be metame. But again, he can metame mes mitzvah, and that's how we said that. Who cares if he's a kohen gadol only or a nazir and a kohen gadol? Obviously, that tells me that even by a kohen gadol, that would tell me that he cannot be metame to his relatives, but he can metame to a mes mitzvah. So then, what does la'avlim of kohen gadol come to teach me? Oh, that's mufna to teach me gzeir shava. That's what la'avlim says. La'avlim also by kohen gadol. What do you need by kohen gadol? Kohen gadol also you would know from this halacha by nazir, because you tell me nazir that's a kohen gadol. So if a nazir kohen gadol can be tamal as mitzvah, so I don't need to tell you by the kohen gadol's parsha. So that tells you to teach you. It's mufna to teach you a gzeir shava. So we're also going to have to figure out why do you need both la'avlim by kohen gadol to teach the same halacha of a gzeir shava. And Lachai Seven agreed was the same thing on the way to do his Pesach or Milah. So that was the halacha of Rabbi Kiva that we had from the previous daf. So that's where our Gemara begins. Ask the Gemara, Rabbi Kiva, let's see. Doesn't make a difference if he's just a Kohen Gadol. And doesn't make a difference if Kohen Gadol and a Nazir. That we said, Nafka Mala'achiv, that we learn now from V'la'achiv by Nazir, to tell you that even if there's two kedushas, that the halach is going to be that he can be tamal mes mitzvah. So the question is, la'aviv u'le'imay. When it says by the Nazir la'aviv le'imay, lamali, why do I need to have the double terminology of la'av l'imay? So in other words, we know the halacha of, in other words, and the question is being asked, like we just said, by Nazir, and also by Kohen Gadol, because again, Kohen Gadol, I already know this halacha because I know it from the parsha of Nazir that says that he's a Nazir and a Kohen Gadol. So why does it say both la'av and li'imay? I mean, as Tais explains, he says, what do you mean? Of course you need la'av li'imay by Nazir. You needed to teach you the halacha of mes mitzvah. That was what Rabbi Kiva said. So Tais, no, what the Gemara is asking is, why do I need both? Say one of them is mes mitzvah. And says Tais, really we could have asked the same thing by la'av li'imay Kohen Gadol. Why do I need both? It should only say li'imay l'gzer shaba, because aviv, I don't need to tell you legufe by Kohen Gadol of Kurayvim, because as the Gemara later on brings the Rabbi Kiva darshans from al kol navshois is rechekim, meis are Kurayvim, and as the Rabbi Schwartzberg explains, meaning because later on is going Kohen Gadol. This is how we mentioned Rabbi Kiva on the previous daf. Nefesh el rechekim, meis is the Kurayvim. That was by Nazir, but by Kohen Gadol we say the same thing. So the tzricha said that the Gemara is going to answer right now is going for both psukim, both for Nazir and for Kohen Gadol, because I know regarding both of them. By Nazir, at least I would know from one of them, why do I need both la'av li'imay? And by Nazir and by Kohen Gadol, I know that halacha already lemes mitzvah from the fact of it says la'achiv, which la'achiv is, if he's a Kohen Gadol, that's a Nazir. For sure I know Kohen Gadol b'tam lemes mitzvah. So again, so I need it for Gzeir Shabbat just to compare the halachas of Kohen Gadol to Nazir, but I will only need one of them. Say li'imay. What do I need la'av for? So that's the question by both of them. Why do I need la'av and li'imay? Says the Gemara, tzrichi. No, it's necessary. Why is it necessary? So the Gemara explains. Because the ikasiv aviv had it only said in the pasuk that who could you not be metama to? Remember, we're going Kohen Gadol and Nazir. It's saying that you cannot be metama to the relatives and not to father, mother, brother, sister. If I said father, not mother, I mean, you know what I would have said? The reason why you cannot be metama to, meaning specifically a father cannot be metama to. Mishum, because the relativity of the father is the chazaka ba'almahu. Your father is only a chazaka, a presumption. Because, like the Gemara says in Chulin, we presume that most of the intimate encounters that the mother had was with the father, because they're the majorities. And therefore, that's why he's the father. Oh, but that's not such a clear relationship. Maybe him, he cannot be metama to. But the mother diyadin diladase, we know that this woman gave birth to this child. So litamila. So maybe I would say that actually the Nazir could be metama to the mother because that's a definite kurba. So therefore, had it only written aviv, I would have said, oh, you know what, the extra word aviv, because it's extra, I know all relatives. No, it's coming to exclude that actually the mother you could be metama to. And same thing is the other way. Because Rachmana Imai had the Torah only written his mother without la'aviv. Havmin, I would have said, Imai lo. You're right. His mother he cannot be metame to. Why? Because lineage does not go after the mother. But the father, since the master says, like the pasuk says, they go according to their families, to their patrilineal descent after the father. That's how the yichus goes. So therefore, had it written li'imay and not written la'aviv, I would have said that the word imay is extra to tell you to exclude the father from the prohibition. And therefore, I would say, hey, he can be metame to his father. Kamash Malan. That's why I needed to say also la'aviv and li'imay, because if I would have said one, I would have said, yeah, that one you cannot be metame to, because they have a flaw. There's an inferiority of either one of them. I have to say both to tell you, no, you cannot be metame not la'imay and not la'aviv. Now, we're on the second line of Tez over here. This is where we have fun, all the way going down to the Amid Beis. So this is a very long Tez. If now we can be done in a few minutes. Tez says like this. He says, it says, Al kol nafshis meis lo yaveh, which we had said, because it's extra, it didn't have to say nafshis and meis. We said that not only is it l'rechekim, but it's also for kurevim. Now, if it didn't say explicitly la'aviv, you would have said that it's specifically, meaning the question that's asked is, what do you mean? You already know Rechekim and Krevim from Al Kol Nafshis Meis Lo Yaveh. From Nafshis and Meis, one's Rechekim, one's Krevim. So if I didn't say anything, I would have thought everyone is forbidden. But Taisa explains, he says, I would have said that maybe it's talking about the relationship specifically of the mother, and from svara, because by the mother, the child doesn't go after her for yichus. And had it said aviv and not imoi explicitly, so although we're including krevim from the extra word mace, I would have said that maybe it's talking specifically korva the av, from the reason that the Gemara says, because, okay, maybe that's specifically for yichus. So therefore, Taisus says, I needed to say both of them. But says Taisus, he says that even if you said aviv and not imoi, how could the Gemara entertain to say that, I would say maybe only the father taking out metamatu. That's why it says la'aviv. And it's specifically coming to tell me, but not imoi, because imoi you could be metamatu. Says Taisus, how could you say that? There's a kavol chaimer from aviv, which we mentioned in the previous daf. We said, if a kohen headed, that's metamel la'achiv ma'aviv, he could be metamatu to his paternal brother, as the Gemara said previously, and it's like it's explicitly saying imoi in the pasuk, so you would know it's from a kavol chaimer. So how can you say, if we would have said la'aviv, I would have darshan, la'aviv cannot metamel imoi, yeah, but you can't say that because we already brought from kohen headed that he can be metamel only to his paternal brother, not maternal brother, and therefore you see that the yichus of being able to be metamel is stronger by the father's side. How could you say, if we would have said la'aviv, I would have said l'imoi, that you could be metamel too? So Taisus brings from Maraf that according to Rabbi Kiva, that he darshans from nefesh meis of Nazir, and also from al kol nafshes meis li'ava of kohen gadol. They were talking about relatives, because again, like you said, an extra word, it says nefesh and meis. So if so Taisus has like a whole new mahalach in the sugya. He says, so that's like a klal for all relatives. It's meaning in the halachas of klal or prat to klal. It's a klal. Al kol nafshes meis, all people, all relatives. So therefore, when you say a specific afterwards from one of the relatives, if you would pick just aviv or imoi, I would have thought to say, what's the ein b'chlal ella masha befrat? In the general term, it's only what's in the specific. So I would have said, father yeah, mother not, or mother yeah and father not, because like our Gemara is bringing that there is reason to differentiate between them, and since it's coming from klal or prat, where you say ein b'chlal masha befrat, so even if you have a kavol chaimer, which is what Taisus' question is from the previous daf, that, what do you mean? If you cannot be mitami to the father, for sure you cannot be mitami to the mother, it doesn't make a difference. And whenever you have a klal prat in general, the halach is you cannot include more than the prat, not through kavol chaimer, not through any other drasha, like we said this on daf lamed hey and aleph. So therefore, it says Taisus, that's why the Gemara is entertaining to say that if it would have just said lo'av that you cannot be mitami to, I would have said that maybe le'imoi you could be mitami to. We said, how can you say that? Kavol chaimer, if you cannot be metamel to the father, for sure you cannot be metamel to the mother. It doesn't make a difference. It's a klal of prat. In klal of prat, you say, ein mechlal, masha b'prat. And there is a reason to be mechalik, like we're saying in our Gemara. And then it says, wait a second. If you're coming to me from a klal of prat, so if that's the case, so why do I need to have the reasoning that the Gemara gives? Aviv, that, you cannot learn out from, because we said that, there's a chazaka only by the father, it's not really such a klal yichus. We said that's the reason why you would say maybe mother, yes, you could be mitami to, because the father, we don't know if it's necessarily the father. So to my mother, we said, it says in the pasuk imai, maybe her you cannot be mitami to, because her children don't go after her for yichus. That's what the Gemara was saying. So what do you mean? Why didn't you just say that the reason why you wouldn't be able to know the other one is because ein b'chlal mashav prat, like in general. I don't need to have svaras. I was only stating pasuk. So why do I have to say a svara to say I wouldn't know the other one? Another question Taisa asks is that it sounds like over here, from the fact that it says of vanimai, I would have known all other relatives. Meaning we're saying if I would have said only one, I would have known the other. But it sounds like, but all the other ones I would know. Meaning that you cannot be mitama to, for example, brother and sister. Question is why? Why didn't you say ein mechlal mashav brat? So I would only be father and mother cannot be mitama to. But maybe brother and sister, you would be able to. So it says Taisus that the Isser Tumah is different because the pasuk already told us by Kohen Hedyed that he cannot be mitami to other people, to non-relatives, but he can be mitami to relatives. So if so, besvara, that it depends on kurva, on relationships. So therefore, the Gemara had to give a reasoning by father and mother, what tzad of kurva you have of one more than the other. And that's why we have to give a svara, because even though it's a klal prat, but we see already in the context of kohen hedyed that it depends on relationships. And therefore, if one, why wouldn't I say the other one? Because we said all the 7 relatives all together in one group by Kohen Hedjit. And also it makes sense that from Av and Ima you would know Achiv Achaisai, because there's no other reasonings to differentiate regarding other relatives, more than the 2 reasonings we said regarding father and regarding mother, as we explained in the Tzrichasa. So therefore, if the Torah is already telling me that you cannot metamet to father or mother, so I would know brother and sister. And therefore, you wouldn't say anymore, Eima Chlal Mashra Prat, because of the fact, like we told you, like you see by Kohen Hedjit, that when it comes to Tumah, that it depends on Kurva, and if father and mother, you cannot metamet for sure to brother and sister. It's not just like a grubba Klal Prat. There's this svara that goes into it. And so you should know that what we're saying is true, because previously, in the previous daf, in the teaching of Rabbi Shmuel, where he had said originally, he says, maybe when it says la'aviv, what's it coming to tell you? Rabbi Shmuel had an interesting svara, said maybe actually aviv tells you that only for the father you cannot metamatu, but for rechaikim, you could be metamatu. Of course, you're not, like Tais explained about it, because you're not in so much pain, but it was coming from a klal prat, and the Gemara says no, because you can't say that. Why not? Because we find by Kohen Hedjit that the svara is punkt verkehrt. That we find that if anything, you would have more to relatives, more than non-relatives. But says Taisus, but one thing you see from over there is that regarding the Issa of Tumah, even though it's a klal prat, and that's what the Gemara's question was basically asking, was state of imoy. Maybe tackle only of imoy, which are relatives, but a chaykim would be mutter. And that the Gemara answers, no, you can't say that, because look at Kohen Hedjit. If anything, Kravim are more being able to metamatu than rechaykim. But what do you mean? I thought you told me that it's a grubba klal prat. I don't care about svara. So obviously you see when it comes to halacha of the Issa of Tumah, well, over here, that he still has to have a tam and a svara l'davar, and therefore that's why we're also saying over here the same thing, that from la'av l'imoy, I would know achal chaysay, this is some svara over here in the klal prat. Now, so Taisa, now it also makes sense that according to Rabbi Kiva, that you had to say both la'av l'imoy, and you wouldn't be able to learn that from a kavachem of av, like we explained. Why? Because lamaisa, it's a klal prat, and if it's a klal prat, so therefore I would have said maybe only father, not mother. And there's a svartim mechalik, like a Gemara said. That's why you need to have la'aviv and la'ima, like a Gemara is saying. It says Taisus, you cannot compare this to Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel actually, if you recall from the previous daf, he did learn that from a kavachemer, imay from aviv. Why is that? How does he learn that as a kavachemer? Because according to Rabbi Shmuel, the klal of Nazir that it says hakol nafshis meis layavai is not talking about krayvim. It's only talking about by non-relatives. He learns that krayvim from la'aviv, which is magala that this isurim is regarding krayvim. Oh, so then you cannot say klal prat. Only if you would say that it's coming to exclude non-relatives, and that you can't say, like we said before, we have a kavachem from Kohen Hedjit, that to the contrary, if you usher and krayvim, for sure you can be usher rechayim. You can't be might rechayim and say that rechayim, because that's what the klal prat would be. It would be saying that it's coming to exclude rechayim, and you can't say that. So therefore you cannot down it anymore, the klal prat, to exclude other relatives, for example, like the mother, like according to Rabbi Kiva, because the klal is not by krayvim like it is by Rabbi Kiva. So therefore, you know imay from a kavachayim from aviv, because again, it's not a klal prat, so you can learn that a kavachayim. But again, you need to have a kavachayim because there's a svara, like we said, because if not for kavachayim, you would be machalik, and you say, oh, maybe only father, not mother, maybe only a mother, not father. So therefore, lamaisi, you need a kavachayim, but you could have a kavachayim because according to Bishmal, it's not a klal prat, because you can't not learn a klal prat according to him, because then you would have to be memaid rechayim and say, oh, okay, so actually this is only by krayvim, because it's klal prat, the prat is only krayvim. That would exclude rechayim, but you can't exclude rechayim, meaning to say rechayim are mutter to be mitama, because like we said, it's a kavachayim from Kohen Hedjit. So therefore, that wouldn't be able to make sense. According to Bishmal, it's not a klal prat, the klal. But then says Taisi says, okay, this all makes sense regarding Nazir, but regarding Kohen Gadol, but there, even according to Bishmal, the klal is by krayvim, because as the Gemara said in the Mem Zayin Mabez, it says in the pasuk al kol nafshis meis lo yavoy, by the Kohen Gadol, all dead people he should not come in contact with. Says the Gemara, it's bekrayvim by relatives. Oh, says Gemara, no, how do I know? Maybe it's only warning him regarding non-relatives. So the Gemara says, no, I would say kavacham of Kohen Hedjit. I mean, Kohen Gadol was once a Kohen Hedjit, and he is a Kohen Hedjit, whatever, so he didn't lose that. So it says Taisus, so according to Rabbi Shmuel, you should learn that as a klal prat. You should say that, okay, so that's talking about krayvim, and you could exclude you could say that it should be say it the way Rabbi Kiva is saying over here. Bishmol should say the same thing. So it says Taisus that it appears to me that since regarding Nazir, we just explained a second ago in Taisus that we just explained for Rabbi Shmuel that you cannot down as a klal prat, as we say, because according to him the pasuk there is talking about rechikim, not kreivim. So therefore you're going to know ima from kavachem from av, like we explained. So if so, by Kohen Gadol also it's going to be the same thing, because lamaisa we have a gezerah shava that the Gemara mentioned a few times and mentioned on the previous Daf Mem Chesed and Aleph that it says imoi by Kohen Gadol, it says imoi by Nazir, so we learn a gezerah shava one from the other. So therefore I can't say by Kohen Gadol to be klal prat if by Nazir I can't say klal prat, because we compare the two of them, and I know imoi from kavachem. So therefore I'll say the same thing by Kohen Gadol. Or another pshat says Taisus is that maybe here's more of an interesting pshat. He says maybe that according to Bishmol, you cannot consider a kol nafshes meis as a klal. Why? Because since we explained that by Kohen Gadol, the reason why I know that pasuk that forbidding him for being mitam lemes is by relatives is not from the pasuk inherent intrinsic by Kohen Gadol itself. How do I know it's so by Kreivim? I only know from a Kavachem, from a Kohen Hedel, like we explained before. So it's not really like in the Pasuk Alein, in the Pasuk itself, you see the klal of the Kreivim. So there is not similar to Rabbi Kiva. By Rabbi Kiva, he explains the Pasuk from itself. From the Pasuk itself, you see this halacha. So therefore, it's considered a bona fide klal. Whereas according to Bishmol, the only reason why you know by Kohen Gadol that the pasuk al kol nafshes means liyava is talking about by Kreivim, not Rechaim. He doesn't say anything about Kreivim Rechaim. He doesn't learn like Rabbi Kiva, like the extra word nafshes and mace. One's Rechaim, one's Kreivim. No, he only knows because what I mean. If it's a Kohen Gadol, of course he's aser in Rechaim because a Kohen Hedyed is aser in Rechaim, and this Kohen Gadol is not any less than a Kohen Hedyed. So obviously it's talking about Kreivim. Yeah, but that's what's called inferred, but it's not explicit. And since it's not explicit, you cannot learn that as a klal, but halachas of klal or prat. That's Taisus' second pshat. Then says Taisus tzarchian, because according to Rabbi Kiva, you're telling me that he's learning the way we explained in the beginning of Taisus that this is a klal of prat. We wanted to know and say, wait a second, you tell me that if it would have said aviv that he cannot be metamatu, I would have said but ima he could be metamatu, but it's a kavachaymer like we said. So Taisus answered this mechudesh to Taisus. He said it's a klal prat. It's a klal kol nafshes meis. A prat would be aviv. I'd say only aviv, not imay. But says Taisus, Rabbi Kiva doesn't darshan the Torah in klal prat. He darshans in ribuy umiyid, as the Gemara says in Sort Perek Shvis Daf Chavav Menalef. So this Taisus, okay, with ribuy umiyid, you would also, the halacha is you exclude one thing, and it wouldn't help a kavachayim or some other midah to be marba, and therefore that's what the Gemara is saying. Although it's using like the way Taisus was using the words klal prat, but it says no, really it's ribuy umiyid. Had it written aviv, I would have excluded mother, and I wouldn't have known them from Mekabel and therefore that's why you could still say the same halacha, even though he doesn't do klal prat, he does ribuy umiyid, and again that would exclude one thing, which would exclude imay. Now that's all from the Maraf, and then so Taisus begins to say that since you need, as we just explained in the Gemara, that you need la'av imay to tell me the halacha itself, to tell me that these individuals you cannot be metamet to. That's what you said, because had you said one, you wouldn't have known the other one. So wait a second. Then how do you know the halacha of meis mitzvah by a Nazir? It's not extra, not by Nazir, and neither is it extra by Kohen Gadol for the Gezerah Shava, because you just told me why he needs it. We had asked a question, we said, wait a second. Why do you know only imay to tell me the halacha of meis mitzvah? One would be enough. So we answered, no, wouldn't be enough. Because had it said one, I wouldn't have known the other one. Now Taisus is asking, the question is exactly the opposite now. How do I even know meis mitzvah is permitted? Because you have an extra word. You don't have any extra word. Had I said one, I wouldn't know the other ones. I need them both. So I say you cannot be metamet to. So how do you even know the halacha of meis mitzvah? Says Taisus, no. Of course they're extra to teach you meis mitzvah by Nazir and by Kohen Gadol to teach you the Gezerah Shava. Because if not, don't say either one of them. Because Rabbi Kiva darshans from the extra word mes to teach you kreivim, meaning which says in the pasuk al kol nafshes meis. So he said nafshes teaches you rechikim, meis teaches you kreivim, and he teaches you this both by Nazir, both by Kohen Gadol. So that's a mikra moli dibra kosiv that it's by all relatives, and the pasuk not differentiating, and l'chara, we wouldn't differentiate between father and mother for any svara. So why does it say either one at all? So that's the point is that so Nazir is teaching mes mitzvah, and by Kohen Gadol is teaching Gzeir Shava. Now, however, if it would only say one, you're right. You need at least one to teach you from the yitucha, from the extra part of it, to teach you this halacha. Okay, I know relatives have been. Why are you saying an explicit, specific one of father or mother? To tell you, yeah, to that relative you cannot mitama, but to mes mitzvah you could. The problem is that's what our Gemara is saying. Had it said only one, then we were asking, so why do you need both? Say one. No, had it said one, I would have thought to say that even though the pasuk explicitly says all korevim you're forbidden in from the extra word mes, but I would have said, oh, why did it pick father and not mother? To exclude the other one, to come explicitly excluding from what the pasuk was saying that it's all korevim. That's why the Gemara says has to say la'av and li'imo, because if it would have said one of them, I would have said, oh, it's not excluding mes mitzvah, it's excluding the other one. Yet you cannot be talking to the father because you don't know for sure if it's your father. Mother, you could. Or it says mother because the yichus doesn't go after it. That's why it says father. So that's what. But again, why'd you say that all is to teach mes mitzvah? I need both because I would have said one. I would have thought excluding the other one. But then Taisa says, wait a second. Who told us that the reason for Rabbi Kiva that why he says father and mother is because, like our Gemara said, because if I would have said one, I wouldn't have known the other. To the contrary, we should say that there's no svar to milchal between father and mother. And actually, both of them are extra, la'av v'le'imai, both by Nazir and by Kohen Gadol. And with darshaning, Aviv is telling you to exclude mes mitzvah, and imai is for the Gzeir Shava by both of them. Now, as Taisa explains, he says, although the Brisa mentions both of them in the teaching of Rabbi Kiva, the words Rabbi Kiva in the Brisa we had in the previous episode, it says, la'av v'le'imai, tarvayu l'meis mitzvah, they're both teaching you that excluding that mes mitzvah you could be mitama to. So it says, who cares? We should still say that it's lav dafka nakad. We only know it from la'aviv, because the Gemara said the same thing for Rabbi Shmuel in the previous daf. So why are you coming with a whole shtickle teira that has to say if I was at one, I would know the other? What do you mean? Even though in the Brisa Rabbi Shmuel had mentioned that la'av limay it teach you mes mitzvah, then you know what the Gemara ended up coming out? That you don't even know it at all from aval imal mes mitzvah. According to Rabbi Shmuel, aviv teaches you aviv itself, that it's by krivim. That's according to Rabbi Shmuel. Again, with these drashas, you have to keep track of what each word is saying. By imai, it's teaching Gzeir Shava. So Rabbi Shmuel in the Brisa said that you know it from aval imai. Nah, you don't know it not from aval, not from imai. You actually learn mes mitzvah from la'achiv, as the Gemara previously said. So says Taisus, obviously you see it's lav davka. So say the same thing over here. We're asking this größe Bombe Kasher Bekiv, we start off the daf. Say, ich verstehe nicht. La'av l'imai, lamali, what do you need both of them for? Lav davka. You know it from Aviv. Ima you learn from the Gzeir Shava. So why is the Gemara coming up with this whole shtickle teira? If I would have said one, I would have known the other. Says Taisus, no, you can't compare Rabbi Shmuel to Rabbi Kiva. Why not? By Rabbi Shmuel, you're right, that the drasha of mes mitzvah is only learnt out from Imai. Because Aviv, you're right, you needed legufe to teach you the halacha of krivim. Because according to Rabbi Shmuel, you don't have extra nafshes and mace. He doesn't learn like Rabbi Kiva, like the Gemara had said previously. So therefore, although lamaskana mes mitzvah is learned from la'achiv, and not even from imay at all, so vos zakter la'av l'imay. It's like, what is? Oh, so it says no, it's not true. It makes sense why we mentioned l'imay regarding mes mitzvah, because had we not mentioned la'achiv, I would have darshan and explained le'imay's mes mitzvah. That's how Taisa, if you recall, Taisa had said that the Brisa explained the order out of order. Why did it say it like that? To teach you, because the only reason why I could say le'imoy is l'gzeir shava, because la'achiv is teaching mes mitzvah. Because if we would not know it from la'achiv, we said we wouldn't have known it. We would have known it from le'imoy. So it says Taisus, okay. So it makes sense by Rabbi Shmuel that although he says la'av l'imoy l'mes mitzvah, okay, of you writes lav davka, but imoy is l'mes mitzvah. Not, I would have said for the mitzvah, not for the gzeir shava, because I always would have said that the primary drush lima would teach you is mes mitzvah, which is teaching you something legufe, instead of teaching gzeir shava, which is teaching you for other things that are not inherent for this halach itself. So therefore, li'imah that was written previously, you're right. I would have made a drush of it lemes mitzvah if I wouldn't have had la'achiv after that. However, lamaskana, that you could darshan mes mitzvah from la'achiv, so you're right, then we say li'imah is l'gzeir shava. Says Taisus, okay, that makes sense for Rabbi Shmuel. But over here in the teaching of Rabbi Kiva, where he learns out relatives from al kol nafshes mace, like we had said before, so la'av l'ima you don't need at all legufayu. So therefore, obviously, what the Brisa mentions, Rabbi Kiva by Mes Mitzvah L'Av L'Imai, must mean that, be'etzim, you need both them for the halacha. And so therefore, obviously, both of them are for Mes Mitzvah. Because if La'av itself was for Mes Mitzvah and L'Imai was for the Gezerah Shava, why you mention L'Imai regarding Mes Mitzvah? Since you mentioned La'av first in the Pasuk, and the first Pasuk is already teaching Mes Mitzvah like we explained, so therefore here you can't say like Rabbi Shmuel. Because Rabbi Shmuel, you could say, you're right, we mentioned La'av because it's early in the Pasuk, but we're not really learning it from La'av. Aval is a gufayu. L'imai, Yitaki, you would learn L'mes Mitzvah. Yitaki don't end up because you have La'achav later. But the words make sense. Rabbi Shmuel, when he's saying La'av L'imai teach you Mes Mitzvah, even though you're not even learning from there. But according to Kiva, would it make sense? V'zak to La'av L'imai. Why mention L'imai? La'av is already telling you Mes Mitzvah. So why would you say L'imai? Obviously, that they both mentioned specifically for the halacha of Mes Mitzvah, and therefore the Gemara over here had to find what is the tzrichas. Why do you need both of and Imai to teach you this halacha of Mes Mitzvah? This is all from the lashon of the Maraf. Now Tosfos says there's a question they ask that in our sugya we keep a darshans la'aviv u'le'imai of Nazir from both of them l'mes mitzvah, as we just explained for Rabbi Kiva. Problem is in Zvachim Daf Kov the Gemara darshans for Rabbi Kiva that actually only from La'av L'mes Mitzvah. And L'imai actually teaches a different case. If he was a Kohen Hedyot and a Nazir, that he's also Mitam L'mes Mitzvah. And then La'achiv teach you not just a Kohen Hedyot, but a Kohen Gadol that's a Nazir, as we said in the previous Daf. That he's also Mitam L'mes Mitzvah. So Maishna says, so how do we understand these two different sugyas? Another question he says is, how could you darshan stam two drashas from Av and Imai? What do you mean? Our Gemara said, you need Av and Imai both for L'mes Mitzvah. So if that's the case, so you cannot darshan more than one drasha, as we just said. So how could the Gemara in Yizvachim darshan from Aviv one thing and Imai another thing? So says Tosfos, however, the truth is that the sugya in Tvul Yom over the Yizvachim disagrees with our sugya over here. And they don't require the tzrichas that we said over here. They don't hold that I would differentiate. So the La'av L'imai is teaching you two different drashas. But then it says, okay, our sugya, why don't they require a pasuk also of a Kohen Hedyot that's a Nazir, like the Gemara says over there? We have from La'achiv, Kohen Gadol that's a Nazir. Why don't you need L'imai to teach you Kohen Hedyot that's a Nazir? Says Tosfos, no, because our Gemara over here holds that since Kohen Hedyot is Metam L'Krevim, so you're not really gaining anything by making this Nazir also a Kohen Hedyot. Although his Kedusha's Olam, we're a Nazir, but since his own Tameh is more lenient than a Nazir. But a Kohen Gadol, who's not even Metam even L'Krevim, there would have said that that added kedusha because it's a kedusha's olam. That maybe cannot even tam l'mes mitzvah. So if I need to have the pasuk of la'achiv by Nazir to teach me that no, even if it's a kagol and a Nazir, he could still be mitame l'mes mitzvah. Now the sugi over there held that no, even if the Nazir is also a kohen hedyot, you would need an extra pasuk, and that's what it learns out from L'imai. But what Tosfos says, what is difficult is because since over there in Perek Tvul Yom, they don't hold that there's a necessity of saying of and imai. So that's why I could learn one thing from Av and another thing from Imai, not like our Gemara over here. So then, wait a second. Av and Imai, by Kohen Gadol, why do you need both of them? Because by Nazir, so that the Gemara explains over there as we explained. But by Kohen Gadol, that's difficult because it should be sufficient with one of them for the Gezerah Shava, like we're saying here in our Gemara for Nazir. And you can't say that the Sugi over there darshans by Kohen Gadol for Aviv for Mes Mitzvah and L'imai Gezerah Shava, because we already know Mes Mitzvah by Kohen Gadol, and we continue to Amid Beis with the Tosfos from La'achiv of Nazir, like the Gemara says, like we start off the Daf today, Mali Kohen Gadol, Mali Kohen Gadol Nazir. So you already know that. So why do you need both La'av L'imai for the Gezerah Shava? Says Tosfos, therefore it appears that they're also actually in Zvachim, the Gemara actually holds that there is a tzricha. So you do need, as our Gemara says over here, had I said one, I would have said not the other one, by Kohen Gadol. Just the Gemara there holds that since the Torah already told us why you need both by Kohen Gadol, that there's no difference between either one, between father and mother, meaning that we said this by Kohen Gadol. If that's the case, so that's just a Gilui Milsa Ba'alma. Now I can learn Nazir from Kohen Gadol, and therefore we darshan both of them by Nazir, because I already know La'avalim are the same from Kohen Gadol, so I don't have to tell it to you twice. Now, sometimes, however, what you have to say is that the sugya over here differentiates because our sugya requires by Nazir also both of them. So therefore it doesn't darshan from L'imai to teach you Kohen Hetyot that's a Nazir, like the Gemara says over there in Zvachim. Another yishuv, says Tosfos, is also that also our sugya over here actually holds like the sugya over there in Zvachim and Tvul Yom. Because it says Tosfos is a teichik to say that the sugyas are disagreeing because they're both Rabbi Kiva. It's not a svar to say that there's two Tanoim according to Rabbi Kiva, from the fact that the Gemara didn't say explicitly that, as it usually says, Tchei Tanoim Rabbi Kiva. Now, although our sugya makes it tzrichasa, why do you need av and imay? And there the Gemara darshans two different things from it, and doesn't say that they're both teaching the same halacha mes mitzvah. Says Taisa, you could say that the pasuk by Kohen Gadol is where you have to say the tzrichasa, and that's been megala milsa in general, but the same thing by Nazir. So therefore, by Nazir they're also the same. So therefore, by Nazir, both of them are being darshan. That's how the Gemara holds over there, and contrast our Gemara over here. But then it says, if that's the case, so why do we darshan over here from l'avali imay by Nazir tavrei l'mes mes according to Kiva? I thought it'd be enough with one of them. Could you learn from that of Kohen Gadol? Says Taisus enechanami that here also avav luchadei is l'mes mitzvah and le'imay takatich like the Gemara Zvachim says of Kohen Hedju that's a Nazir. However, our Gemara did not bother to go through all the drashas because it relies on the sugya over there in Zvachim, and that's the way the Gemara does that. It's makatz in one place and smach in another place. If that's the case, so why is Rabbi Kiva over here mention the drasha of Kohen Gadol and Nazir? Like we darshaned, when we wanted to rely on that Gemara over there, like it relies on the Kohen Hedju and Nazir, that we darshan from Li'imai, which the Gemara over here doesn't bring. Why are we bringing the drasha of Kohen Gadol that's a Nazir, but not bringing the drasha of Kohen Hedju that's a Nazir? I thought you're relying on what the Gemara says over there, and therefore you're not saying it over here. So what you could say is that's because we had to bring the drasha of Kohen Gadol and the Nazir from La'achiv to tell us that what's the difference between the Kohen Gadol and the Nazir and the regular Kohen Gadol, because we have to tell you why L'Aval Imay of Kohen Gadol is extra to teach Gzeir Shava. Because had I not known that, I would have said Imay is teaching you that halacha. I had to tell you how I know it, why Av Imay are extra, because I know the halacha of a Kohen Gadol and Tamal Mes Mitzvah from that drasha by Nazir. And this that it says both of them are Av Imay, that we said because you have to tell me the tzrichas between them. And also, from that is where we ask on Rabbi Shmuel regarding a Kohen Gadol and a Nazir, where do you know that from? And Lachaisai, Rabbi Kiva also explains because once you have to mention la'achim, so mention that of afterwards, which la'chaisai, because you already started to darshan that which you needed to, so we finish it up the pasuk till the end. Or another pshat says because according to Rabbi Kiva, you need to have more la'chaisai more than Rabbi Shmuel, because Rabbi Kiva does not hold of this svar. Who cares if it's one lav or two lav? So again, that's why you have to say what you said. But you're right. The rest we rely on, and therefore we could say that the two sugis don't even disagree regarding the tzrichasa of the lima. Okay. Let's go back to the Gemara. The last line of the Gemara is actually the Bach adds on the word over here, Rabbi Kiva, that aleph over there. According to Rabbi Kiva, it says in Vayikra kol nafshes meis lo yavoi lo amali, meaning as the Rush explains, once we darshan according to Rabbi Kiva, nefesh meis by Nazir, which we explained that it teaches you rechokim and krevim, so the Gemara wants to darshan that pasuk by Kohen Gadol also. When it says, kol nafshes meis lo yavoi, why do you need that for? What is it coming to teach me? So it says the Gemara as we get into the Beis. So al kol, when it says al kol nafshes meis, on all is lafuke rechekim. Now, what does it mean lafuke? Taisa explains, whenever we're using the words lafuke over here till the Mishnah, it means like the words nafke lemahai kra, meaning from this pasuk comes out that drasha. So it's actually saying that this is what we learned out. It's not excluding it, but it's like saying where we're learning out from. Now, the problem, says Taisa, sounds like from the word al-kol itself, you're darshaning that there's an isser by rechekim. From the fact that the Gemara shortly is going to darshan from the word nafshais to the halacha of when you have a revius of dam that comes from two mason, because it's in the plural and the singular, which Taisa says it's a deichik, because by Nazir it also says al-kol nefesh, and even so, we don't darshan the rechekim only from nefesh, not from al-kol. So says Taisa, no, here also we're darshaning rechekim in non-relatives that are forbidden for the Kohen Gadol, from al-kol nafshes. But still we're going to darshan from that also the halacha of revius dam from two mason, because it says nafshes plural and not nefesh. So it's not really from al-kol. It's really from al-kol nafshes, because it's really the word nefesh that's teaching me. But it says in the plural, so like we're saying the word al-kol. But it says is a wonder, because why does Rabbi Kiva have to bring by Kohen Gadol the pasuk to teach me rechokim? Why do you know from Makabel Chem from Kohen Hedju, like the Tan in the beginning of the Perig? Or because of the Issa that was when he was at Kohen Hedju, where did that go? Like we said before, which is the primary reasoning, like we mentioned. So why do you need a special limit for Kohen Gadol to be Asr and Rechakim according to this Tana? Taisa says that it's to be Lavala B'shnei Lavin. You're right. Of course we know that a Kohen Gadol is Asr Rechakim because a Kohen Hedju it was. We just wanted to tell you they can have two prohibitions. Taisa says a little bit of a wonder because the Gemara doesn't mention this at all, Tzarchi and Lashmaraf. Whatever. Okay, it says a kasha. Why? But upon them, this pasuk by Kohen Gadol. Once we finish explaining by Nazir, we explain by Kohen Gadol. Alcohol is lafuka rechayka, meaning that's how we know that it's forbidden in non-relatives. When it says mace, a dead person, that's an extra terminology. That's lafuka krib. That can tell you that it's forbidden even in relatives. When it says navshois, what's that coming to teach me? That's lafuka that's coming to teach me. And we mentioned this already in Daf Lamed Chestes Rasha. A revius dam shiyotzim mishnei mesim. If you have a quarter of a kav of blood, a quarter of a log of blood, that shiyotzim mishnei means it comes from two dead people, shemitam ba'oil, that it contaminates in the same room. Shemaka says in the pasuk, "Al kol nafshes meis layavoy," which we darshan nafshes meis is plural. Is two nafashes from meis, which is singular, which is one dead person. So it's one revius, because a person cannot live less than revius of dam. That's telling you that even then it's going to be matame ba'oil. So that's what we're learning out from that pasuk. That's forbidden for a kohen gadol. Even that, even if it's from two dead people, but if it's revius of dam, it's going to be forbidden for him. Now we continue. I look at the next mission. We can continue on this theme regarding al elu tumas anaz megalech. Regarding the following tumas, a Nazir has to go ahead and cut his hair off, start over his Naziris, because he violated the Isav Tumah, which is that one that it says that he has to start over. What type of Tumas? So alames, if he comes in contact with a dead person. Val kazais minames, an olive size of a dead person. So that's whether he's touching it, whether he's carrying it, whether he's in the same room. Shekmaz is going to explain, wait a second. If a kazais minames is megaleach, so of course a whole mess, that seems to be unnecessary to say that. Says the Mishnah further about kazais netzel. If you have an olive size of netzel, which is this liquid that oozes out from a dead person, as the Gemara is going to explain. Valmoli tarvad rekev. Tarvad is a spoon. So if you have a spoonful of the decomposition of the dust of a dead person, which the Gemara is going to explain what the shiur is, that also he would have to cut his hair off and start over. Ala shedra, on the spine of a dead person, al gagailas, and the skull, which even though it doesn't have any flesh in it at all, and the Gemara is going to ask, does it have to be the skull and the spine, or either one of them? Continues the Mishnah about even minames, a limb from a dead person, a limb from a living person, she'eshalav basik that has enough flesh on it, which the Gemara in Chulin Daf Kov Ches explains that that's the amount of flesh that the limb, if it was a living person, would be able to regenerate, even though it doesn't have a gezayis abasa, but it would be able to. So that's enough to make it an aver min achai. Val chatzi kav atzamas, and a half of a kav of bones, which we're talking about that it's coming from either the majority of the number of bones in the person's body or the majority of the structure. So, for example, if let's say you have most of the bones that were broken in the dead person's body, and it's a half a kav of bones, meaning a little bit from every single bone, which is from Rav Binyan, or Rav Binyan, as the Gemara is going to explain later on, are the two shaykim and one yerech, or the opposite. Now, says Tais, although for the term of oil, it's enough for the quarter of a kav, as the Gemara says, as the Mishnah says explicitly in the first parak of Olis, these things are batam ba'oil, and it mentions a quarter of a kav of bones that come for Rav Minyan, Rav Binyan. But here it's alocha meishim b'sinai that the nozin namegalech only on the chatzi kav, not with a quarter of a kav. And says Tais, you can't explain that the chatzi kav is from other bones that are not Rav Minyan, Rav Binyan, because even then ba'oil wouldn't be matame. From the fact that the Mishnah doesn't teach in Masechtas oil, so for those who matam ba'oil, so therefore it must be from Rav Minyan, Rav Binyan, and it's a chatzi kav, alocha meishim b'sinai. Continues the Mishnah about chatzi loig dam, and a half a loig of blood. Even though here also, even though to mitam ba'oil it's enough for the revius, as the Mishnah says in Oles, but says twice again, a naz is only megaleach on a chatzi like, because again he says shiur we know, as the Gemara says in Erevin, is alocha meishim b'sinai, and that's alocha meishim b'sinai here for the nazir. Now says the Mishnah, all these things we mentioned are b'malgon, whether you touched it, b'mason, whether you carried it, v'aleilon, whether with the tumah of oil, that all these things are considered that they're mitam in all these three different ways, and that he's going to have to be megalech. Now, regarding the bone, the size of a barley corn, that's amagoy v'amasoi. That's only regarding if he touches or if he carries it. Then they would have to megalech. But oil, it's not even metame, let alone megalech. Says the Mishnah, okay, al elu hanaz megalech. Regarding these things, the nazir would have to cut his hair, which the Gemara is going to explain. What is al elu dereisha and what is al elu deseifa come to exclude? And you're saying these sounds like you're excluding something. You're repeating the term again, and he would have to cut his hair off. Again, like every tummy person from a mess, he'd have to spray himself with the ash waters of the paraduma the day 3, day 7. Besais says a kaiman and demolishes all the days that he counted up until now, like the passages by Yom Yiplu, the early days fall away. And he doesn't start counting in the Nazir of Tahara, until he purifies himself, or maybe as Kabbanaisim, and he brings his Kabbanas, which says not to have the gears in the Mishnah of Yovi Kabbanaisim, and it's obvious from the Gemara, because the Gemara asks who's the town by Mishnah, and if it said that he has to bring his Kabbanas and only then start over again, obviously it would be like Rabbanan, like we'll explain in the Gemara. Says he want to turn around and learn the Brisa. After Rameh passed away, Rabbi Yehuda said to his students, don't let any of the students of Meir, now that their Rebbe passed away, in over here. Because they provoke. They're not coming to learn Torah. They're only coming to bother me with their halachas. But one of the primary Talmid of Meir, Sumchas pushed his way, benichnas, and he entered. He said to them, this is what Meir taught me in the Nusach of our Mishnah. He said, it's for these tumas that a Nazir has to cut his hair, alames for a dead person, and the outsides of a dead person. Now, Rabbi Yehuda didn't teach the Mishnah that way, alames, because if it's kazayis memes, obviously alames. So, because Rabbi Yehuda got upset, and he said to them, didn't I tell you, don't let the students of Meir in over here? They want to provoke. If al kazayis memes megalech, if you have to cut the hair for kazayis memes, alames akoshkin isn't all the more so for kazayis. What's zogster? Don't let them in. So on that, the Gemara continues to Nun Med Aleph. Rabbi Yisi says, Yomi Meir Shach. They're going to say, Meir passed away. Yehuda gets angry. Yisi Shasing and Yisi silent. Torah Matei, what's going to be with the Torah? Rabbi Yisi says, I'll tell you why you need it. It's not a wrong nusach. Lo nitzach elamesh she'ein olav kazayis basar. You're right. A kazayis of basar, of a mess, would be matama. But here when we're talking about a dead person that doesn't even have an olive size of flesh. So that's a chiddush, because that's not the same thing as the kazayis. The kazayis is basar. Here even don't have kazayis of basar. But says the Gemara, that's not a good answer. Because vadayin yomi, you could still say and ask, al eiver mimenu megaleach. The Mishnah teaches that a limb of a dead person, which, as the Mishnah teaches in the first parak of Olis, that's even if there's no kazayis basar on the aver, because eivarim ein lem shir, salkula koshken. Forget about the kazayis part, the aver part of it. Of course, you're going to go ahead and be matami for the whole mess. So why do you tell me for the case of mess? So that's not a good answer. So rather says the Gemara, it must be like Rabbi Yechanan said. You need it for a stillborn. That his limbs were not connected yet with the connective tissue of the ligaments. We're talking about that, yes, it's a whole mass, but he didn't even have ligaments, which there, and so there's no kazayas basar, and a limb from that nafel would not be matam ba'oil, because there's no gidin, because the aver is only called the aver, a limb, if it has bones, flesh, and ligaments. Oh, but on the whole mass, you would be migalech, even though there's no gidin. Now, says Taisus, this says over here, like Rabbi Yechanan says, Rabbi Yitzchak explains, where else does Rabbi Yechanan teach this halacha? In the Mishnah Masechet is all he says it, where the Mishnah there says, a mess, and gizayis and a mess, and tam oil, Rabbi Yechanan explains, what do you need to say mess for, is by nefesh, and skasha, but begin, and that's the same thing in our Mishnah. One more answer, so that's one shot, either it's talking about a nefel, and it doesn't have gidin, that's a chiddush, which you wouldn't have from, because there's no kizayis basa, and it wouldn't even be al tumas ever. Rav Amay says, this that you have to say mess is El Rev Binyanai, is talking about when the majority of the structure, or the Rev Binyanai, the majority of the number, She'im Behen Rev Batzamis, we don't even have a quarter of a kav of bones. So it says, as Taish explains, that's what Alames is teaching in the Mishnah. Obviously, we're talking about that you don't even have a complete limb. And the chiddush is that we're saying it doesn't even have a quarter of kav of bones. Where even though the shiur by Nazir has to be a half a kav, we're saying that even if there's not even a quarter of kav of bones, he's still going to have to be megalech on that because he has roiv minyan or roiv binyan. But if he wouldn't have roiv binyan or roiv minyan, then he wouldn't be megalech, only if he would have a half a kav of bones, like we say in the Mishnah, that you're not megalech on for tumas oil with a roiv tzames. Now, so he says some have the girsa that lo nitzchel l'shadva gogoyle shem roiv tzames. And we find this later in the parak Daf Nun Gimel that the Gemara says I Rabba and we don't find Rabba elsewhere saying it unless you say it over here. So therefore they might gain this svaram over here. It says it's not that the girsa, because how can you say that alames in the Mishnah is talking about shedra gegolis, but the Mishnah explicitly says al shedra gegolis? So therefore it says no, you have to have the girsa el red binyan, which is not explicit in the Mishnah, and for that reason also makes sense why Rabba doesn't answer the Mishnah olis like he says over here alames to say over there le red binyan le minyan, because that's explicit over there. So therefore, you can't explain over there. Alamaz must be like Rabbi Yechanan over there, and if that's the case, it must be like according to Rabbi Yechanan. In our Mishnah, must be Tan v'Shai in the Mishnah Reb Minyan. If he holds like Rava that Nazir would be megalech on it, so that's the second answer. That's Tumat that doesn't even have a Reva Tzamais. That's the chiddush saying you don't have baby, you don't have Tumas Basar, and that's what's saying that you're going to have the Tama of Nas. Thank you to any time.